Come. Here we go. Perfect. So we are going to begin. I'll share my screen here and then we will start with the presentation today. There we go. I am going to send you a link, few links here, which we will be using later in the class. So just send me a thumbs up if you have received those links. Hi, Christy. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So here I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And here we go. Okay, number one, am I audible to everybody? Okay, are you able to see the screen? Perfect.
Everything looks good.
Perfect. So a very good evening to all the students. Thank you so much for joining in today for the live session on lab safety. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Sneha and I work as a chemistry lab technician at the college. I've completed my master's in chemistry and soon I'll be completing my provincial instructor diploma program. It is to inform everybody today that the session will be recorded and closed captioning will be provided for better accessibility of the audio. Feel free to raise the questions and ask them in the chat and keep yourself muted, and then we will unmute when we will do the discussion session. Here we go. So on the screen here, you see the image of Tanaha Nation. First and foremost, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I reside is the traditional unceded territory of Tanaha and Kinbasket people. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work in the territory. It is a beautiful place surrounded by rocky mountains, very peaceful and close to Mother Nature. Yeah, we see here is the image of a road accident. So what happens during a road accident? Like we damage ourselves, we undergo a loss. What do you think are the common reasons behind a road accident? I'll be waiting for your answers in the chat. Perfect. So not paying attention, very good. Poor road conditions. You're chatting on the phone. Yes. Lack of focus or fatigue. Exactly. Not paying attention. Perfect. So yeah, these are the common reasons. So if somebody is not following the rules, they're speeding, they are not familiar with the symbols on the road, and they are doing distracted driving, they will end up in an accident. Something similar happens when we are in lab. So in lab, we undergo lab accidents. Like a poor road user, there are people who are not careful when they're working in the lab and they end up in an accident. So it is very important that we follow good laboratory practice and we follow the instructions of our instructor when we are in the lab. We may end up as a mad scientist if we are not following the instructions. Here, I would like to share an experience of mine where it was late at night, around 8 at night, and then I was just pouring bromine from a container bottle to a beaker. And then bromine is the fumes which come from bromine are brown colored fumes, and they are very irritant to your respiratory tract. So I was not careful, and then when I was pouring, I inhaled a lot of fumes, and then ended up feeling nauseous, and then I could not breathe properly. I had to run out in the fresh air. I reported it to the instructor, and then they were, I think a few more students are joining in. So yeah, so they asked me if they would like me to call the ambulance. So yeah, that was not a good situation. So I should have been careful when I was using that hazardous chronic chemical. So I don't want any of my students to go through this experience. Let's not be a mad scientist and be careful when we are in the lab. So objectives of today's session would be that by the end of this session, all the students will be able to employ good laboratory practices, and all the students will be able to identify the laboratory equipment and apparatus which we will be using in the lab. And you will be able to explain WHMIS hazard symbols. We will talk about this in detail later. Otherwise, the layout of this presentation today is that we will start with a pre-assessment poll, which will not be marked. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just I'll be waiting for your response. Then we will go through presentation, and then further we will practice what we have learned through discussion, and then a post-assessment quiz. In the second half of the presentation, we will be talking about WHMIS hazard symbols, and finally, we will sum up today's presentation. Uh, so we are surrounded by toxic chemicals in our everyday lives as well. It's not just confined to the chemistry lab. So I would like to know that if you guys are aware of the toxic chemicals in your surroundings, if you see there is a QR code on the screen, and I've sent the link in the chat as well. So I'll be waiting for your responses. I'll give you a few minutes to answer these questions. You guys can send me a thumbs up once you're done. Wow, I see some responses on the screen. Soda, yeah, bleach, cleaners, very good. Okay. Yeah, toilet cleaners, exactly. Sodium bicarbonate. So I see pretty much everybody is aware of the chemicals which we are surrounded by in our everyday life. So these are the common cleaners we use in our laundry, kitchen, and then even at workplaces we use sanitizers and whatnot. We see fire extinguishers and stuff. So lab safety basically deals with proper training, wearing PPE, which is personal protective equipment. Then we follow standard operating procedures. We should know how to handle the waste in the lab. There's proper signage, which we call hazard symbols according to WHMIS, proper laboratory practices and safe working conditions. So safety begins, the lab safety, it begins way before we start doing the experiment. We need to be in PPE, which is personal protective equipment. We will talk about this in detail in the next slide. Uh, so when we talk about dressing up for the lab, make sure we all have lab coats. Closed toe shoes are always recommended. No flip flops in the lab. Fully covered clothing, no shorts or skirts, something which is covering your whole body. Safety goggles are very important. You'll be provided safety goggles in the lab. The only thing is, if you're wearing contact, we recommend not to wear contact lenses while working with the chemicals in the lab. And if there are any medical reasons, you can always submit a medical form and we can look into it. And if you wear prescription glasses, you have to put the safety glasses on top of your prescription glasses, because your prescription glasses will not be enough to protect your eyes from any accident if happens. Then protective gloves, you will be provided with the right kind of gloves during the experiment. And then your long hair should always be tied when you're working in the lab, behind and covered. We don't want any accidents. No earbuds or like AirPods in the lab as well. Next, good laboratory practice is clean hands before starting the experiment or doing the experiment, and then after. And then try to change your gloves frequently once they are soiled, or you have worked with a hazardous chemical like sulfuric acid. Try to remove your gloves and change them frequently. And try not to taste any of the chemicals. Yeah, do not do that. Avoid doing that in the lab, and avoid direct contact with the chemicals. And do not inhale a lot of bromine like I did. Try to just, there is a right procedure of doing the odo test in the lab. We will talk about it in the next slide, which is the wafting process. So if you are trying to smell or take the odor of any of the chemicals, number one, ask for your instructor's permission that if it is okay to get the fumes in your. That's why we work in the fume hood. We will do the formal orientation of your lab surroundings soon, so you will be able to see. Take permission from your instructor, and then you just cup your hand above the container, waft the air, and then take just enough, inhale just enough to get the sense of the smell. This is usually done when we do preliminary tests in the lab with organic compounds. So some of the chemicals have a pungent smell. You can just sense the smell and you can get an idea what compound it is. But we need to be very careful, because I've had this experience with the toxic fumes which came out of the bromine liquid. It is not at all a good experience. You feel choked, and then you may end up disrupting your mucous membrane or your respiratory tract or your lungs. So try to be safe in the lab. Next, never use chipped or cracked glassware. So when you will be provided with the glassware, just do a quick check on the because you don't want spills around. So make sure. And then another pro tip will be that when you're working in the lab, there is a lot of time when we heat the glassware. So when we heat the glassware, the glass which is cold and the glass which is hot looks completely same. There's no difference. So try to use tongs and be careful of the surroundings, that you're not just leaving that hot beaker on the shelf. So somebody just grabs that hot beaker and just, yeah, burn their hand. Next is with the test tube safety. Now, if you see this image on the screen, is the image clear to everybody? Yeah. So if you see this image, so this is the right procedure of working with the test tube. Because test tube is a narrow, very narrow tube. What happens is, if you're heating any liquid or any solid in the test tube, there is high possibility of that liquid or solid popping out because of the extra pressure it puts on the walls of the test tube. So always hold it with a test tube holder, and then at an angle away from your face or anybody working around you. If you're working with your lab partner, try to just keep it away from anybody's face. This is a very common accident which happens in the lab as well. So the next is familiarize yourself with the lab layout. You should know where the safety exit is, the entrance is, where the fire extinguisher is in the lab, where the eye wash station is. So you need to familiarize yourself with that. Now we will familiarize you with some of the common lab apparatus which we use in the lab. Number one is the beaker, if you see on the screen. So beakers do have the volumetric measurements on them, but we do not prefer to use these for volumetric measurements. This is just used as a container because these will not give you precise readings. Next is Bunsen burners. This is a source of heat in the lab. Burettes, these are used for precise volume of liquid. If you want to pour 0.101 mils, which is high precision, we will use burette in that situation. Clay triangles are usually used when you're using Bunsen burner, the setup which we will be using. Droppers, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what the use of droppers in the lab is for. Further is glass funnels. Now, glass funnels are used simply to pour one liquid from one container to another container, and the other use of funnel would be we can use it for filtering. You just put the filter paper on the funnel and then you can pour and then you can do the filtration process. Next is graduated cylinders. These are also chemical apparatus, one of the chemical apparatus which is used if we want precise volumes of liquid. 0.1 mil precision is what we use this for. And then the next one is hot plates. So there are two kinds of hot plates in the lab. One are just the hot plates, the other ones are the hot plates and the stirrers. So you don't have to continuously stir the liquid you're heating. So the stir bar will do the job for you. Next is pipettes. Now with pipettes, these are also for precise volumes of liquids if we need. But the only problem is I've seen people sucking the air in with their mouth when they're using the pipettes. It's always recommended to use the pipette pumps when you're using the pipettes. Next is the ring stands with the rings. You can see this is usually used when you're performing titration and when you're trying to filter something or trying to use the Bunsen burner to heat something. Test tubes, everybody knows about it. Next is test tube holders. These are very important, especially when you're trying to heat something with the inside the test tube. And then the tongs. Tongs are used if you want to hold a beaker when it's heat or hot or you're trying to heat it. Volumetric flasks are high precision. Like there is a common practice which we will be doing in the lab. That is where we will be diluting a concentrated solution. So if I've given you, say, 5 molar hydrochloric acid, and I want you to dilute it to 0.5. So the best practice, the best apparatus you will be picking to do that would be a volumetric flask. Wash bottles we use for two things. Number one is distilled water, and number two, acetone wash. Watch glasses are usually used to heat something, or if you want to cover your something you're heating and you want to keep it covered so the vapors do not come out, we will use watch glass for that. Wire gauge is used to heat up. If you're heating up something, you will put wire gauge. The Bunsen burner will be at the bottom, and then you will put the container on top of that. Perfect. Moving ahead. So in the links which I've sent you in the chat, there is a PDF file with the laboratory equipment. I would like you to read it because we will be doing a pre-lab quiz in our next session. And if you go through that, that PDF will be very informative and helpful. So make sure you save it. And I will also provide you with the handouts when you come in the lab. So the next three important practices in the lab are proper waste disposal. This is a very important responsibility that we properly dispose of the waste which we generate in the lab. Emergency preparedness and labeling and storage. So WHMIS hazard symbols will be covered in labeling and storage. So waste disposal. So we have to be very careful when we work in the lab. Number one pro tip is just use enough amount of chemical you need. Do not waste it. If you want, say, 10 mils of something, try just to get 2 mils extra and then pour it, because it's very hard to uh, follow the procedures when it costs a lot when it comes to waste disposal. A third party company comes at the end of the year and we pay big bucks just for that waste disposal. So, and the other tip would be, if I give you, say, 15 mils of a chemical and you have only used 10 mils, never pour the rest of the liquid back into the original container, because it is going to cause cross contamination. Maybe somebody poured something into that beaker and then it is going to spoil the whole bottle. So one tip here is, we dilute solutions, especially acids. We always recommend to use diluted acids in the lab. So never pour water and concentrated acid. So this reaction is highly exothermic, and it is either going to break the container because of the high pressure and heat, because it is an exothermic reaction, or the high temperature would cause the liquid to bubble up and it may splash on your face. So be very careful. Never pour water to concentrated acid. Always put concentrated acid to the water, and do it slowly with constant stirring. Next, move on to the next slide, where, yeah, there are different categories of waste. If you want more information about it, just be careful. Chlorinated organic waste, non-chlorinated organic waste, organic waste with halogenated stuff, organic waste. We will talk about it on the next slide. So yeah, so in the lab, we have these waste containers, which are, we deal with, there is a procedure which we follow to deal with this waste disposal. So make sure the waste, you will always see it in the lab manual, that where what waste goes. So just follow this. You will see these labeled containers in the fume hood number 4 in the lab. Perfect. So for emergency preparedness, we have fire extinguishers in the lab. We got eye wash station, and then we have this safety station. Then we have his first aid kit. This is just another description. You push this if you want to turn on this eye wash station. And the last one is fire blanket in the lab. Perfect. Now it's the discussion time. We will do picture analysis for better understanding of what we have learned today in the science lab. Some scenarios, you will see some scenarios on the screen. If you want to unmute yourself and answer, or you can just answer it in the chat. We will quickly do this part as well. Okay. Here we go. So here you guys see the first scenario. So what is going on wrong in this picture? So there are 2 wrong things. You might find the third one as well. So I'll be waiting for your response.
Well, to start with, the Mac is pointing the opening of the test tube towards Jody.
Exactly. Perfect.
If it boils over, it's going to get her in the face.
Yeah. Is this Bruno?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruno. Okay. So,
and Jody doesn't have her hair tied up.
She needs to. Exactly.
Yeah, it's on fire.
And then anything else? So what are the 2 things which we can do to make this situation look better? So do you think we can use, Kimberly is using the fire extinguisher right here, but we have fire blanket as well. that could be used to turn off the fire. And then rather than, yeah, somebody can let him know that do not point it towards her face because she might get into the accident and the liquid may splash on her face. Yeah, Kudrat, go ahead.
I think Jody can wear the glasses for her eye protection. That's one thing she can do.
Perfect, exactly, you're right. That could be done as well. And we will move on to the next scenario now. This is a total disaster. So, two things. We will start, there are a number, a bunch, but let's start with two things. Anybody?
She's not wearing shoes and she's eating in the lab.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a variety of loose materials on the desk.
Yeah, chemicals and food, and then I see sharp object on the floor as well. So this lab needs a total cleanup. Here we go. Anybody would like to? There are a bunch again, but we will start with a few, even if somebody like participants can answer two major errors, problems in this picture.
There's only one guy here wearing safety goggles.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Safety goggles here. And then,
So one fellow has the beaker pointing right to his face.
exactly, the test tube is pointing the face. And then there's mess around. I see broken beaker on the floor. And then she is in her flip-flops. She's in heels.
Eating in the lab or
Yeah,
drinking in the
eating in the
lab.
lab. And then backpacks should always be left outside in the lab. All your eatables and your water bottles should be outside the lab. This is another error. This is the fourth scenario. So there's two wrong things. She's dissecting the frog hair.
These two guys appear to be initiating a sword fight
Yeah,
with their
which is
with
not recommended in the
laboratory
lab.
equipment. That doesn't strike me as particularly great.
Uh-huh. And then again, I see some food here, and then sharp objects are playing.
The girl isn't wearing a lab coat as well, which isn't necessarily a strict
Mhm.
violation, but not great to do while you're dissecting something.
Perfect. And open here, exactly. Here we go, is the last one.
I think
Nobody's
Meredith is,
wearing,
sorry, go ahead.
so nobody's wearing any PPE.
Yeah. Kudrat, do you have an answer?
Yeah, just wanted to say like Meredith is not wearing the proper shoes. And again, like Christy mentioned, like no one's wearing particular PPE for this.
Exactly. So we need to be very careful of our janitors as well, people who work for us. Now, what Jarvis is doing is he's putting glass and he's not using the broom and the right equipment to clean up the glass, but he's putting it in regular waste bin. But there's always glass bin for waste broken glass in the lab. So if a janitor comes and just puts their hand, or they may hurt themselves when we are not careful of where the waste should go. It needs to go in the right container. That is the problem here for sure. Perfect. Now it's the time for assessment. So this is a time-based quiz. You will guys have received in the chat, there is assessment quiz. 3 minutes, 10 questions, you will be marked for that. And then your responses will be saved and we will discuss about it later. Whenever you start, your 3 minutes start that time. So if you check the chat section, you'll be able to find the link. And if anybody cannot see that, let me know. So the quiz will be based on what we discussed.
Sorry, Sneha, I'm on my Surface and I don't see the link.
The link, the chat. Okay, let me see. Okay. So I've sent that link again. It is the third one, which says assessment quiz. Has everybody else?
Excellent, thank you.
No problem. Are you guys able to have access to this link? Perfect.
Yep.
So are we supposed to share what we got to the class, or?
So we will keep it anonymous, and then if you will have any questions, we can do a one-on-one discussion in the lab, or if you want to come in my office hours, we can discuss about that. We'll wait for another 1 minute and we will proceed further. How did the quiz go? It's great, pretty good. And he's done. Perfect. And we will perfect. So we will move on to the next slide here, which is about WHMIS hazard symbols and labels. So basically, when we will go through it, you will be able to identify the level of danger associated with any of the chemicals which you will be using in the lab. So these are the pictograms. We will discuss about the first pictogram, which is flame over circle. This is basically for the oxidizers. These substances give off oxygen, and then what happens is they intensify fire. Usually, they release fluorine, chlorine, and then may cause accident. If you see any of the bottles with this hazard symbol, this is what it means. The other one is the flame. Here I would like to mention about in our science classes when we were kids, we learned about sodium, that it catches fire if left in open air. So you will see if you see a bottle of sodium, you will see this symbol over there. Aerosol spray bottles, and then which is any of like aerosols is even the deodorants, the spray deodorants which we use in our day-to-day life. This is a bottle of Glade cleaner, linen cleaner, and this has this signage on it to tell us how dangerous it is. Then is exploding bomb. again, this depicts that this liquid or anything which is stored, if heated, may explode. The next one is, you see here, is this explosion sign on the screen on a Lysol disinfectant. It may cause, if heated up, it may cause explosion. Next is the gas cylinder. This signage is very common on the propane tanks, which we have at hand, which some of the people use at homes. So you see here, it's flammable. It has this gas cylinder under high pressure and this exclamation mark, which X means acute toxicity, may irritate the skin or exhibit minor toxicity. The chemical should be kept away from skin and eye protection as a precaution if you see any of the chemicals with this bottle. I will quickly finish with these signs. Next is the skull and crossbone one. And here we have the corrosion one, health hazard, environment. And these are the common bottles which you will see in the chemistry lab. Last is the biohazard. We do not have to worry about this signage in the lab because the chemistry lab doesn't have it. But yeah, if you're in the biology lab, you need to be careful. Perfect. This is another example of one of the chemicals which are used in our day-to-day life. I would like to mention here that what we have done today, we will be discussing about it in our lab as pre-lab quiz. And then we have covered the good lab practices. Your assessment has been submitted. And then we will be talking about these hazard symbols. I would like everybody to go through that, and then we will be doing a pre-lab quiz. I'll quickly move the slide to the last slide here. Perfect. So here is the reference list of all what we have learned today. These are the resources which I've used.